everyone. How are you doing? My name is Brigida Toruño. Welcome to Uno Soul's Chat. As we are all adjusting to this greatly changed societal situation, I've been called to chat with Uno Souls, and they are people that are beacons of light in our community. They were beacons of light before COVID-19, and they continue to be that. We want to connect all of us together in hope, courage, and love. I'm honored to be chatting today with Chris Yoko, an Uno Soul, and he is the CEO of Yoko Co. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah,
Tell
thank you for
me,
doing it.
tell me, how have you been doing through this time?
I'm probably in the same bucket as most people. It's a lot of up and down. So some days you're like, oh, you know what, I could do this every day, and then other days you're borderline insane.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's been challenging. I feel like towards the beginning of this, I was in shock. Right now, it's like 6, 7 months ago, and feeling so many emotions come up until finally grounded myself, got into a routine, a new routine, right?
Absolutely, a lot of those.
Yeah, yeah. And then recently again, I've been feeling that same kind of like those emotions coming up of whoa, this hasn't ended. And then again, I ground myself. I have a lot of coping tools that I use to do that.
Right. What do
Yeah.
you find are the most useful like grounding mechanisms for you?
Well, for me, my top one is meditation. I've meditated for 28 years, and it's just something that
Wow.
I
Way
automatic.
before it was on trend.
What?
Way
Exactly.
before it was, yeah, on trend. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so that I just do that automatically. It's like breathing. I wake up and I meditate for 30 minutes. So that starts my day off well, but if I need other tools, I'll bring in qigong or eat an energy medicine or a walk in nature.
What
I
was that
mean,
first one you mentioned? I hadn't heard that before.
oh, qigong?
Yeah.
Qigong is, have you heard of, and I might be pronouncing it wrong, Tai Chi? Tai
Yeah.
Chi? So it's very similar to that, but it goes even slower and it's much more meditative, much more
Oh, okay.
meditative. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's been some life sustaining. And I do yoga too. So
Okay. I was gonna say you've got a lot of tools in the toolbox.
I do. I need them. How about you?
Oh, for me, yeah, any kind of like physical activity tends to be a good one where you can just kind of get out of your own head and
Yeah.
do something. We've got two little ones, but every now and again, if I get a chance to like sit down and write, that's nice. But when you spend so much time at the computer, as we all are now, it's
Yeah.
not always comfortable spending even more time there. So, whether it's getting out and doing a workout or a walk or a run or whatever the case might be,
Yeah.
I've been really lucky. Uh, for whatever reason it is, the hockey rinks are still open. I play, recreational hockey, so we get a chance to
Oh.
play. But my oldest daughter has some potential issues with COVID, so I actually wear a respirator while I play hockey, which makes the breathing a little bit trickier. But I can go out
Oh.
there and play safely. And we had an outbreak on one of the games that I was in, and
Oh.
I think one guy had it going in, and 10 people caught it as a result. So
Wow.
uh,
So you
big
were
spread.
there or you weren't there?
I was there. I was at that game.
But you
I
were
just,
all, wearing the right type of mask?
yeah, I have it's like a P100 respirator. So
Oh,
it's pretty
okay.
good at filtering everything out. But along with that, it
Mm.
filters a lot of air out. So,
Oh, right. So it makes it
but
more
just being
difficult.
able to do anything physical is a good escape for me. And then, I've always been a big reader. So just getting a chance to open up a book is always a good time.
That's right. That's right. That's good. Have you read any good books?
Oh, so many. On the more like self-improvement, better development side, I recently read the Untethered Soul. I don't know if you've read that one.
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
That
Michael
is
Singer.
that is deep. Like,
It,
there's not a lot of books that I read that like every 3 to 5 pages, you're just like, I gotta let that all soak in. It took me forever to read it because honestly, like it was like, well, let me think about that. Let me turn that around in my mind. And
Right.
so I recommend it to people whenever you're in the right place to read it, like you will know because you won't be able to put it down. And if you're in a place where like you're not in the right mindset, I was like, just set it aside until you are because you're
That's
just going to be
right.
very resistant to everything in it. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It really is one of my favorites. Michael Singer, he has such an amazing story, and to have built this tremendously successful company, and then it went down. But even as he built it, he was all in, a long time meditator, right?
yeah,
Very spiritual person who was like, I'll just go with the flow, we'll see what the universe wants for us. And it just flourished. He
yeah.
manifested these tremendous things. But I actually listened to he has talks now just on his website because he has a retreat place in Florida,
Oh, I
and
didn't
it's
know
not
that.
open because of COVID, but
Right.
he has talks 3 times a week, and that are on his website. And I've been listening to them because he has such a special way of thinking of how to get through life, right? That we're living
Just
in the
breaking down,
illusion.
yeah, everything into like what you think is the problem, and it's like take that 10 steps deeper, and like that's where he's at. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing you said that because it's really, really one of my favorites.
It's yeah, a fascinating read. I read that fairly recently, and then the other one that I really enjoyed that was more on the fiction side was the Three Body Problem, which
Oh,
was really fascinating. So I think that was a good one for anyone who's into sci-fi. I'd recommend it for more, but the first 120 pages are tough to get through. But then once you get through it, I mean, it's absolutely.
oh, okay, okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah,
How
thanks
about
for
yourself? Any
sharing.
good recent reads?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I am a voracious reader. I mean, and I usually have a pile of like 5 or 6 books, that I'm reading. I've been reading a lot of Don Miguel Ruiz. He's the one who wrote the Four Agreements.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he has 2 other books, The Mastery of Love and The Voice of Knowledge. And I'm reading The Voice of Knowledge right now. And it's that same idea that, of Michael Singer, where, the whole idea of the ego versus the conscious, the illusion versus the reality, where it's deep
Right.
stuff. It's deep stuff.
Absolutely. I'll have to check that
Yeah.
one out. Voice of Knowledge, you said?
Yes. Hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, so I've been enjoying those. Yeah. So Chris, tell me about your business. What do you do? And if you could tell us how it's been going during this time.
Yeah. So my business is a web presence management firm. The way that we phrase the work that we do is we help organizations that have a passion or a purpose beyond just profit leverage their greatest asset, which is their web presence. And
Mm.
especially now when there's no in-person conferences, you can't take someone out to lunch. I mean, you've got website, email, phone, Zoom. Like you've only got these virtual ways to connect, and that all ties into our clients' web presence. And then the folks that we work to tend to fall into one of 2 buckets. They either know the impact they want to have, so it's organizations we've been lucky enough to work with, like Amazon Conservation Team, the WWF, and these organizations that very polished, obviously understand the impact they want to have on the world and how they create a better world
Mhm.
and move forward with it. And then there's a lot more that fall in, the 2080 rule applies that are aspirational. They're organizations that know that they can do more and want to have a greater impact, but they don't necessarily know exactly how they do that, or they don't necessarily know how they lean into it and use it as a potential differentiator. And so we help those organizations in some cases help kind of finely tune what that impact might be, and then more importantly, help them set up their website marketing automation, email marketing, content creation, video animation, all of that fun stuff, just to really help make sure that the word gets out, and it does so in a way that generates a positive return on investment. So all the metrics and reporting and analytics fall into
Ah,
that.
that's awesome. I mean, that's so important for a business because the website presence now and for a long time, it's everything. It's everything for a business.
Yeah, I mean, even before COVID, for pretty much everyone, it was either your first or second impression of a business was, okay, like I either heard about them from somebody, I'll check out their website, or I'll see what they're up to online, or I'm researching something and I find them online, and then depending on if I like what I see, maybe I follow up with them. And so, that's kind of where we live and what we get into. And then you'd asked about how things have gone with COVID and kind of what's going on in that world. And so it was in some ways fortunate for us because we've always been a remote company since employee number one. So we didn't really lose a beat in terms of how we work because nothing changed for us in that capacity. And it also gave me a good glimpse into just how much we maybe took for granted working remotely as other companies were trying to figure all of that out. And so we've been fortunate enough to be able to help coach some other companies and do like speaking engagements and stuff to help talk about how do you adapt to work culture remotely, how do you either emulate or improve your culture as you move to remote, and how do you I think the biggest problem people have when they're moving remote is they try to make it a copy and paste, carbon copy version of what happened in the office. And it just doesn't work. Like you can't do those many check-ins with people. You can't look at people over people's shoulder. You have to treat it differently. So we've been able to kind of help guide and coach some folks through that side of the process. And then on the other side, I mean, just like everybody, we're small business. And so we got rocked by a lot of the waves, especially in like March and April. We had to do some pretty major changes then. We had to unfortunately furlough a handful of people. And that's the worst process. But then as things started to stabilize, we start to look at, okay, like at this point, like, okay, this is how the world's going to be, and there's obviously more chaos coming. Some of the lessons that really came out of that were, how do you create kind of some rules and some things that allow you not to worry and not to get trapped in that, kind of just cycle of like worrying about these things that you maybe can't control that maybe happens. What if the economy gets disrupted? What if the real estate market goes under? What if this thing happens? And so we had some really good advice and some mechanisms we put in place to help kind of take our focus off of that, just by putting in some really simple if-then rules. So, hey, if we get to this situation, here's what we're going to do about it. If we get to this situation, here's what we're going to do about it. And I thought we were doing that just for practical reasons. But what it also did is allowed us to kind of let go of those things where we said, all right, like we can't control what's going to happen. And if these things do happen, we've got a game plan for it.
Right.
It's kind of like with football coming back, quarterback has an audible in their back pocket. If this play looks like it's not going to work, try this other play. It's kind of the same thing. We can't control what the other team's going to do or what the world's going to do necessarily. But we can control how we react to it, and having that plan kind of let us say, okay, check, like let's move on to the next thing and not get so caught up in it. But so many people I've talked to have been really caught up in that cycle, it seems.
That's great. That's to have like a plan B and C and D. And I love what you've been doing with teaching different companies how to be remote. That's a really good idea. I mean, I've had the business, my Uno Translations business for 22 years, and we've been remote the whole time. And you're right, you don't really think about how, taking that for granted, because we just went, right into this because we didn't have to have adjustments. We didn't go from a brick and mortar to home. Yeah. So we didn't have that part to have to adjust to. So like little mistakes you learned from over 22 years, someone else just made in 2 months. It's like, it didn't feel bad when we did it over that span of time, but concentrated, it certainly does. Yeah, it's even like the whole water cooler idea, right? That people gather at the water cooler for chats and just how are you doing, and just more informal type of conversation. So that can't really happen. So I don't know. I mean, what do you suggest for companies in that sense?
Yeah, so I mean, it's stuff that you actually have to manufacture at those moments, right? Because you're not going to have people naturally bump into each other. And a lot of people do that thing where they're like, oh, well, we set up the random channel in Slack or a water cooler channel in Teams or whatever the case might be. And they think that solves it. And it's just not honoring the medium, right? Because even the introvert eventually had to go get water. But guess what? The introvert doesn't have to type anything in Slack ever, so they might never take part of those conversations.
That's right. That's
What
right.
we have done, and one of the things I recommend people do, regardless of how they adopt it, is for Slack, there's a bot called Sup, like S apostrophe UP.
Yeah.
And all it does is it grabs three people, usually once a week or every other week, depending on how you set it up. And it says like, hey, you three should get together and have a virtual coffee or something for 20 minutes. And it helps you kind of set that time aside on your calendar.
Oh.
And it just randomly pulls people. So you always get a chance to have people meet that don't normally interact. And because it's three people, you avoid that sometimes stale conversation that can happen. So like, hey, what's up with you? Not much. What's up with you? Oh, okay. Like it's always kind of different. So you get
Yeah.
that third perspective. And so doing things like that kind of manufacture those moments, but in a way that kind of honors the medium and the fact that we're all remote is
Mhm.
really important way to just kind of change the way you think about it.
Well, that's a great idea because we use Slack with my team, but I don't know about the SUP. So I'll have to give that suggestion.
It's a good
Yeah,
one. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. That's great. Um, so Chris, I have found that during this time, finding little moments of joy has been really helpful for me. Um, I got a bird feeder in right as COVID started,
Okay.
and I was fascinated. I just couldn't even work. I was just staring out the window, looking at all the birds come in. But that was like this moment of joy for me. What have you found to be moments of joy?
For me, I mean, it's really wrapped up in my family. So I'm not a morning person by any stretch of the imagination. And so a lot of times, like whenever my daughter would go to school, my oldest daughter would go to school, like I'd be able to say goodbye, but like that was it. Like that was all the morning we really got. And now, since COVID, we've had a better chance to kind of hang out and play a little bit in the morning or like learn a couple things together and spend some time together. And I'm still getting to do that. My oldest daughter is back in school in person because her school's really small.
Mm,
But my younger daughter, her preschool's not opening back up, and so she and I still get to spend some time in the morning, and so that's always fun. And then it also gives, I feel like my wife a chance to kind of breathe a little bit and catch her breath, and then of course we get to spend a little bit of time just usually talking in the afternoon or evening after the girls go to bed. Well, go to bed, they're in their bedroom,
right.
so they might be playing together, but at least we get a chance to disconnect and chat, and it feels like that's been a nice way to break up, the monotony of just kind of falling into that habit of like, all right, we do this, we watch some TV, whatever, you fall asleep. Like just having those conversations about kind of the bigger topics, and those are things you can always turn over in your mind, I think, for a long time. So that's been those kind of smaller moments of joy, certainly.
No, that's good. That's great. Um, and I was wondering about things that during this time that you thought, oh, this is an opportunity to like learn Spanish.
Right. Yeah. That was one of my big ones. Is I did Spanish like in like middle school or something, and then had forgotten all about it. And I'd always wanted to be bilingual. I'm super envious of people that can speak multiple languages because language shapes thought, right? And so that's why we like borrow words from so many different languages because we're like, even though we have hundreds of thousands of words, or what, 120,000 words or something at our disposal, like no one really kind of fits this exact meaning. And so we'll steal
Right.
Schadenfreude from, Germanic language or whatever.
Yeah.
And then not to mention just like the brain elasticity and everything that comes along with being bilingual. And so I'm like, all right, you know what? It could not be easier than it is now to learn another language. So leaning into, Duolingo, and there's so many podcasts. I like, there's a Coffee Break Spanish is a good one.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
I
so I've been
hadn't heard
checking
of
out.
that. And
Yeah,
it's
some of
just
those
all
and
in
just,
Spanish?
yep. And like very low level. So, it's right at my pace. It's like very basic conversations that I can
Oh,
follow. But it's a great time to be able to do some of that stuff. And it also, if you're out on a walk or you just need something to do rather than playing Candy Crush or something, it's a good thing to jump into. And I think just help yourself grow a little bit. So you've got something to show whenever we get into whatever the new normal tends to look like.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And you and I have had a chance to do a little bit of writing each other in Spanish. So
I
that's been
do
fun.
appreciate.
But I'm really impressed at how you're not shy. You just like you just seem to get right into it, which is awesome. I mean, that's the best way to learn a language in the sense of not thinking, oh, it has to be perfect, or I won't say it, or I won't write it. You know, some people think that way. But so it's really great that you're doing that.
It's
You
just
just
because
jump
I
right
know you're
in.
not judgmental.
No, no.
If it was somebody else, I might be a little bit more, tentative to say stuff. But I like you're, my Spanish pen pal, so I get a chance to kind of throw some stuff out there. And you've probably been seeing over like the last couple weeks, like, oh, he's starting to actually conjugate verbs instead of just throw verbs in places. So
Yeah, that's
slowly but
great.
surely trying to get a little bit better.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Um, so Chris, I would love to know about what you just mentioned. Like you said, the new normal. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, what do you see that being, and are you thinking of like a time frame too?
Oh, the time frame is tricky. I think a lot probably depends on what happens in November in the administration, just because hopefully it starts to be less of a like politicized issue, and we can go back to science and then just figuring out what solution makes the most sense. That's well balanced, that protects the people that have, more of the conditions that are going to make them more susceptible to disease, and let some of the people that want to have a little bit more of the personal freedom to have it, but not at the expense of others. As for the timing, I don't know what that would look like. I've been following, the rapid tests are starting to come out now. I think Abbott's supposed to be releasing like 50 million of the rapid test in October, and
Oh,
I'm familiar with a couple other companies that are working on getting FDA clearance to have some of that. And I think that starts to be a real big game changer, just because then you could, hey, before you come into our restaurant, like you've got to do a quick test, and if you've got it, like, all right, now now you can treat it and go back home, versus right now just being like, do you got a fever? Maybe you're running hot one day, maybe you're not, like whatever.
right.
So I think that that's going to really help. But I think, I mean, I still hear a lot of people think about like, well, whenever this goes back to normal, and I think that's like you said. I mean, the new normal is what will absolutely be there, because it's been a catalyst for adoption of things like Zoom. Where, I mean, I'm sure you've been using Zoom for a long time. I know I've been no stranger to Zoom because we are remote, but for a lot of people, it's kind of a brand new world. Um, but even beyond like the remote work, that used to be nice because it was a competitive advantage for us. And now I'm like, oh, now it's not. So now we'll have to figure out what the next thing is.
That's right.
Um, but even beyond that, I mean, I think the adoption of the virtual technology for doctors is way better. Like the telemedicine visits, especially half the time, if you just want a consult, like being able to just talk to somebody, hey, I got this weird bump. Like, what do you think about this? And just being able to show it is way more convenient. But it also starts to decouple, I think, the health system from consultants and practitioners, because now it's like, okay, well, I could talk to somebody anywhere in the world about this
Mm,
problem, but I'll still need somebody probably locally to treat it. And I'm interested to see what that world looks like. I think there's going to be a
yeah,
similar like bifurcation in like higher ed, where at a certain
yeah,
point, if it's just a branding game and all that matters is like where you got the piece of paper and that's what you're paying for, like I think there's going to be like the mid tier is going to probably drop out, and you're going to see a lot more virtual attendance for higher yielding schools if they don't continue to go crazy with pricing and everything. And there's
mm,
probably a couple other areas where that just nationalization of what used to be a local commodity really starts to be adopted. And it'll be interesting to kind of see how that shakes out and what the world looks like whenever there is. I mean, if we thought it was like a winner take all economy before, just with like SaaS businesses, like I think that's going to start to happen with professional services, with healthcare, with education, like with a lot of these other industries. And that's going to be, I mean, if we don't get our hands around it, could be a terrifying place, or it could be a really exciting place full of a lot of new opportunities. Depends on mindset a
yeah,
lot, as well as how we all collectively react.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's very insightful, you know, to think about all those areas that are going to see changes, huge changes. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you see on the horizon?
Well, I mean, you know, I think from the language perspective, a lot of that did go virtual in terms of the conference interpreters,
Hmm.
because again, conferences aren't happening, so a lot of them went virtual, so they need conference interpreters.
Right.
And so Zoom actually has a very good platform for simultaneous interpretation to
Oh,
take
interesting.
place.
Hmm.
So that's, Zoom really has thought of a lot of things, and it's made it user friendly. It's not super complicated, to get some of this stuff. So a lot of our work has gone, in terms of the face-to-face interpretation, has gone virtual. Even a lot of the community interpretation is
Oh, yeah.
also virtual now, or on the phone. And so we do offer phone interpretation. So it's changed, but of course we've done the written word. That's been the majority of our work with the 200 languages, and that's always been kind of virtual. I mean, it's all been just by computer.
Yeah.
So that hasn't changed. Um, but yeah. So I think it's definitely some good things have come out of it, because I think that in terms of conferences, even, I think a lot of organizations are going, wait, I don't need to fly people from all over the
Right.
world to come here. And of course, I think for paid conferences, they can still charge people, maybe not as much, but because there's not as much investment going into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for all of that. If people are getting the knowledge that they're looking for, but just in a slightly different platform.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting because I think you'll also see, to that point, like a differentiation in conferences where it's like how much of it is content and knowledge based versus how much of it is like more experiential. And then, the backbone of all of these things tends to be relationships, right? Like it's kind of who you know in each of those spaces. And I don't think that's going to change. It's just the people you know are going to be global as opposed to local. And
Right.
I think that'll amount to some interesting changes, but I think a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and it's been so great to hear all of your words and your knowledge, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
Yeah, and just as a last question, I'd love it if you could leave us with some words of wisdom.
Oh, geez. One that I try to live by a lot is we judge ourselves by our intentions, we judge others by their actions. And
Mm,
so be real, especially right now. I mean, whenever you see stuff people are posting on Facebook with whatever side you disagree with or agree with, is think about maybe what they intended and what they're coming from. And if you can think just past that first step, and maybe that's in line with what we were talking about with the untethered soul and everything, is try to think about what's happening not only in your mind and the way you're constructing the situation, but the fact that that's happening for everybody, and be mindful of that before you decide what type of engagement you're going to have with them. I think the world would be a better place.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you so much. I just feel this is a time to be gentle with ourselves, and it's a powerful time to unite and to help each other, and to live in to have the goal of living in peace. So thank you again so much, Chris, and I honor the light in you.
Well, thank you very much.
Have a
Accepted and
wonderful day.
received. All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Uno Souls Chat. You can find us at www.unosouls.com and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I would love to hear from you if you would like to chat with me. Have a beautiful week and see you at the next episode.